Let's get right into it. What's good? It's Woog. We've got Anthony Joshua, 28 wins and 3 losses, taking on Daniel DuBois, 21 wins and 2 losses. This fight is for the vacant IBF heavyweight title, which was stripped from Alexander Usyk when they decided to run it back between him and Tyson Fury. Alexander Usyk before that was the undisputed heavyweight champion with all 4 belts. This is a part of Riyadh season as Turki Al Sheikh and company take their act to Wembley Stadium, the UK, which seems very appropriate. I mean, they were just in LA. I actually went to that Crawford versus Majimov fight, but now Riyadh season is becoming a global thing. And so now finally we're getting one of these mega heavyweight fights as a part of Riyadh season, but appropriately in the UK, in this case at Wembley Stadium, as Anthony Joshua and Daniel DuBois are set to go at it. And this fight takes place on Saturday, September 21st. And anytime Anthony Joshua fights, I want to break out the Fela Kuti t-shirt. And Fela Kuti is a famous, or was a famous, Nigerian musician band leader. Fela Kuti was a huge deal. And since Anthony Joshua is also of Nigerian descent, not only that, but when he rematched Andy Ruiz, he came in to Fela Kuti's, he entered the ring to Fela Kuti's Water No Get Enemy. So in most of my Anthony Joshua fight previews, I usually tribute the legendary Nigerian musician activist, Fela Kuti. So as we gear up for AJ versus DuBois, AJ is at an interesting point of his career. He's gotten with trainer Ben Davison, and they are currently on this pretty interesting run. Like, no, his last opponent wasn't a world-class boxer, Francis Ngannou. But let's be honest, because of Ngannou's performance against Tyson Fury, where that fight really could have gone either way, and it also featured an Ngannou knockdown of Tyson Fury, and Ngannou won multiple other rounds as well. Very close fight. Because of that performance, a lot of people thought that Ngannou might have a good chance against AJ. It was just this non-boxing kind of the mysterious nature of this obvious athlete and brutal puncher entering the square circle and fighting these top heavyweights. Well, Anthony Joshua absolutely crushed Francis Ngannou, dropping him 3 times. The third of those 3 knockdowns was a brutal, lights out, put you to sleep knockout. I look at that as being one of the knockouts of the year. Now, a lot of people probably wouldn't consider it for knockout of the year because Ngannou's not a boxer, and I get that. Like, if, you know, Jake Paul, when he knocked out Tyron Woodley in their rematch, should that be considered for knockout of the year? I think that in most cases, somebody would rather point to, let's say, Angelo Leo's recent knockout over Luis Alberto Lopez, where you've got boxer versus boxer. So I get all that. But if you just want to look at the cold-blooded, brutal nature of a knockout and just how dramatic it was, given the magnitude, I mean, it was a huge stage out in Saudi Arabia, and there was a lot of intrigue around AJ versus Ngannou, and for it to end in that devastating a fashion where Ngannou falls back on his folded leg, hits the canvas for the 3rd time, and this time he's out cold as the very reserved, laid back Anthony Joshua just starts kind of pacing and quietly circling the ring, looking out at Tyson Fury, giving a quiet, cool dap to Ben Davison. It was just, I mean, he looked like an assassin in there. And then when you couple that with the 3 wins prior to that, the decision win over Jermaine Franklin, the 7th round knockout, a beautiful knockout over Robert Helenius, the impressive 5-round stoppage over Otto Wallin, and then this recent 2nd round knockout over Francis Ngannou, this post back-to-back losses to Usyk, part of Anthony Joshua's career, is really looking like a bit of a resurgence. And not only that, he's not only winning these fights, but it looks like he's getting some of that nastiness back, some of that brutality back, some of what made Anthony Joshua a must-see attraction when he was working up the ranks and then ended up winning multiple heavyweight championships. Anthony Joshua, up until the point he won a decision against Joseph Parker, Parker was the first to take Joshua the distance. All the way up to that point, he, like Deontay Wilder, all the way up to that decision win over Bermane Stiverne in their first fight. That's where Deontay Wilder won the WBC title. Both Wilder and Joshua had 100% knockout percentages. But shortly after AJ's, career-defining, king-making win over Vladimir Klitschko, and then obviously that stoppage loss that changed everything in the heavyweight division against Andy Ruiz, the idea is that Anthony Joshua has become a more patient, a more tentative, a more cautious type of fighter, where yes, he did stop Kubrat Pulev in the 9th round, but he had the decision win in the rematch against Andy Ruiz, which I thought was actually a pretty intelligent game plan to capture all those belts back and to get your career back on track. But there was the decision win against Jermaine Franklin, and then obviously the 2 12-round decision fights, the 2 close losses to Alexander Usyk. So I think that a lot of people saw AJ as becoming a more sweet scientist, somebody who was looking to go tit for tat and to play that chess match rather than to come in there and try to take your head off, try to knock you out. Well, these last few fights are indicators that we've got some of the brutal Anthony Joshua back. No, he's not the head over skis, just go for broke in the first couple of rounds type of fighter, even though, again, with that finishing knockout punch, he totally sold out because, he also knew that he had a very badly hurt Francis Ngannou, who was biting badly on the feints and to those punches to the body, the jabs to the body and the right hands to the body. We're going to revisit that and what that might mean for Joshua versus DuBois. But yeah, Anthony Joshua is in a very exciting, interesting part of his career, a part of his career that I think a lot of people thought would never return. Now, again, Francis Ngannou is not Daniel Dubois and does not have the boxer's pedigree, but he is a super dangerous puncher. He's a lot better than a lot of people thought he would be entering the squared circle. But again, I just can't get over how he would try to parry down a bunch of jabs and punches to the body. Like he would throw his hand down, like trying to block it, where now that your hand is moving down, the guy could be feinting, he could be going to the body, or he could be looking low and throwing high. And if he looks low and throws high and you do this, you're totally vulnerable. And that ended up really costing Francis Ngannou. I'm actually surprised that Tyson Fury wasn't able to exploit that a little bit more. But now Anthony Joshua is about to fight Daniel Dubois, who's on a bit of a resurgence himself, wouldn't you say? After taking the knee against Joe Joyce due to the jabs kind of battering his eye, getting stopped by Joe Joyce in the 10th round, winning your next 4 rounds, even though the 4th of those 4 wins was against Kevin Lerena, where Dubois got dropped multiple times. It just looked like he didn't get his balance, like something was either wrong with his leg or his equilibrium, but he got dropped and it was puzzling. And then he ended up stopping Lerena in the 3rd round. He had an impressive knockout over Trevor Bryant in the fight before that, knocking him out in the 4th round to capture the WBA regular heavyweight title that Trevor Bryant somehow held for a long time. But yeah, Dubois won 4 fights in a row after getting stopped by Joe Joyce, then entered against Alexander Usyk and had that controversial, a lot of people thought that should have been a knockdown to the body of Usyk, where Usyk was just writhing in pain and the punch looked like it was on the belt line basically, but it was ruled a low blow. And Usyk, aside from that, was pretty much just piecing Daniel Dubois up. Yes, there were several other body shots that Dubois landed that Usyk would look to the ref like, hey, you gonna do something about that? Even though those body shots looked legit, I thought most of those shots looked legal, but they were visibly causing Usyk some problems. And Dubois landed a few of those, but he really didn't put his foot on the gas and seize the opportunity when he would hurt Usyk. And again, aside from that, Usyk was boxing him up, ended up stopping him in the 9th round. And Dubois in that fight took another couple of knees. Those knockdowns weren't of the, I put you on the canvas, place you on your butt or on your back types of knockouts. No, these were, I think I'm done taking punches for right now. Let me take a knee. And that was what led to the stoppage. He just didn't get up. He just stayed on that knee. They counted and the fight was over. So that was twice that Daniel Dubois took the knee and got knocked out in that fashion, which led to him being considered and viewed as a bit of a quitter. Like, you've got that quit switch in you, where if you start taking a beating, start getting discouraged, stop wanting to endure the punishment, you just look for the opportunity to take the knee, to end the suffering and call it a day. That reputation led into DuBois' fight against Jarrell Miller, who was coming back from his multiple PED suspensions. He had had a couple fights back, including a stoppage over Lucas Brown. But Jarrell Miller and Daniel DuBois, the question was, can he weather the pressure that Jarrell Big Baby Miller will undoubtedly apply? Well, he did. And there were a few times that started looking concerning when Jarrell Miller looked like he started rolling downhill, started picking up the activity, 3rd round, 4th round, 5th round. Well, by the 6th round, Daniel DuBois had pretty much weathered any storm that Jarrell Miller was bringing. Jarrell Miller was way overweight, and then it was a matter of Daniel DuBois just boxing and putting a beating on Jarrell Miller. And not only did Daniel DuBois win this fight, he stopped Miller in the 10th and final round. That was a pretty redemptive moment for Daniel DuBois. And so he had that momentum and kind of goodwill with the public, you know, kind of restoring some of his reputation going into his next fight against the longtime IBF mandatory and a lot of people's heavyweight boogeyman, Filip Hrgović. Most people thought Hrgović was going to win this fight. Hrgović was the betting favorite. And Hrgović was launching a lot of right hands and was catching DuBois with a lot of right hands and left hooks and jabs. But Daniel DuBois in that fight just looked like a man on a mission. It was really something to behold. Like, he was willing to walk through whatever Hrgović had to give him because he looked like he was just hell bent on getting to Filip Hrgović. That determination was kind of like that was the what is possible with this physical specimen that is Daniel DuBois. Like, when he was he's still a young fighter, very young fighter, but he was an even younger fighter who had these physical tools, right? He was a devastating puncher, just a hard puncher. He was a bit of an athlete where he could jump in and throw a couple hard shots. Not a great defender by any stretch, but he was just an offensive beast when he would let his hands go. But he had sweet science, IQ, vulnerabilities, lack of heart, reputation. So a lot of people thought that, yeah, even though he is a physical beast, he is very beatable if you can discourage him and beat him up enough, basically. Well, again, he was hell-bent on getting to Hrgović, walked through several right hands that I'm sure would have dissuaded other opponents. And you quickly saw between these guys, between Hrgović and DuBois, who had the quit switch that night, who was getting discouraged, whose body language started saying, I really don't want to be here anymore. And yes, this fight was stopped on cuts in the 8th round, but it sure looked like Filip Hrgović was starting to look for a way out, was starting to look like he was ready to go, like he was ready to be done with this, that he didn't anticipate that DuBois would be walking through his punches, walking through his power in this way, and was just determined to let his hard punches go. Yeah, Hrgović was in bad trouble by the 6th and 7th round. Again, this was an 8th round TKO. This was a huge moment for Daniel DuBois. Like, pretty much all of the reputation that he lost against Usyk and against Joe Joyce, he's built much of that back to where it's like, damn, if this is the new Daniel DuBois that we're dealing with, he's going to be hell on a lot of these other top heavyweights. So this is where we are right now with Anthony Joshua versus Daniel DuBois. And you know what? I just want to take a quick moment. Let's give some props to Alexander Usyk. Not like he's hurting for props. He's pretty much in everybody's top 3 pound for pound. If he's not 1, he's 2. If he's not top 2, he's 3. But he's one of those 3 slots. You could put him in any one of those 3. But Anthony Joshua did get outboxed by Alexander Usyk, did get beat twice. Alexander Usyk is just such an outlier. And Daniel DuBois did get stopped, did get outboxed and stopped by Usyk. Once again, Alexander Usyk is the exception. He is truly a special fighter. And now he's beating Tyson Fury, and now they're heading into their rematch later on this year. Can't wait for that. But yeah, when people were saying Anthony Joshua is more or less a brute, isn't a great boxer, can be exploited, yes, Andy Ruiz did get to him and did chip him up, did get on the inside, hit him with that left hook and change everything in that 3rd round after Ruiz himself had gotten dropped just moments before that. But let's grade fighters who fight Usyk on a curve, because your other opponents aren't going to be Alexander Usyk. So when people were looking at Joshua versus Otto Wallin and they're like, hey, Otto Wallin might have something for AJ. I'm looking at that fight. Look, on that Riyadh season night, I thought even before the fights occurred, that it was a much higher likelihood that Joseph Parker, who's been a champion, who we've seen fight great fighters and good fighters in the past, that there was a much higher likelihood that Joseph Parker beats Deontay Wilder than there is that Otto Wallin beats Anthony Joshua. I just didn't see anything that Otto Wallin did better than Anthony Joshua, including the sweet science boxing. Because if you look at Anthony Joshua's other opponents, yes, he did have moments of trouble against Alexander Povetkin. Yes, he did get dropped by Vladimir Klitschko, but look at the level of fighter that he's fighting here, and then look at the other reality that he bounced back from these problematic moments and either got the stoppage. Well, in both of those cases, Klitschko and Povetkin got the stoppage, but he fights back. I know that it looked like Andy Ruiz had him super discouraged and he wasn't cooperating with the ref after some of those knockdowns, but by and large, Anthony Joshua is the better boxer when he's fighting. Like Jermaine Franklin, pretty good boxer, not as good as Anthony Joshua. Kubrat Pulev, hell of a jab, nowhere near the boxer that Anthony Joshua is. It's just that he's got these physical tools like Daniel Dubois, but slightly different, but in some ways similar. But Anthony Joshua, he's such a gifted puncher that people sometimes discredit his boxing ability. And yes, he did have that couple of fights with Derek James where he started looking like he was relying too much on the sweet science, too much on the jab, too much on the boxing, that it looked like it reduced the threat level when it came to AJ. Well, again, now at this point of his career, it looks like he's kind of marrying the two, the boxing with the brutality, which is the best of AJ. And again, I wouldn't make too much of those back-to-back losses against Alexander Usyk. And keep in mind, the second of those two fights, it was a split decision win for Alexander Usyk. So it's not like Usyk was dominating AJ in the boxing department. No, AJ was getting his too. AJ was winning his rounds too. Those were close fights, especially the second one. I know in the first one, Usyk had AJ in all kinds of trouble by the end of that one and had him hurt multiple times throughout the fight. But yeah, Anthony Joshua is a really good boxer, which is why when I size up AJ versus Dubois, I'm like, yo, if Anthony Joshua hits Daniel Dubois with half of the right hands that Filip Ergovic hit Daniel Dubois with, we're not talking Daniel Dubois walking through AJ's power. I'm sorry. Like, I would be shocked if Daniel Dubois is able to take Anthony Joshua's right hands repeatedly and keep on walking him down, or to take Anthony Joshua's left hooks and to continue walking him down. I just don't see it. AJ is a special puncher. And Daniel Dubois, yes, I think that he does have a puncher's chance here. Maybe he does hurt Anthony Joshua. Daniel Dubois, he's not super fast, but he's not slow. I think that these guys might have somewhat comparable hand speed. So Daniel Dubois is nearly the same height as Anthony Joshua. They're like within an inch of each other height-wise. AJ may be taller by just like a half inch to an inch max. But Daniel Dubois could very well jump in and hit AJ with the right hand, or he could counter. If AJ jabs, maybe Dubois counters. Yes, Daniel Dubois can hurt AJ. I just think that there's such a higher likelihood that, one, in the slower moments of this fight, in the sweet science moments, it's going to be AJ jabbing to Dubois' body, AJ moving around the ring, showing his craft. I think that Daniel Dubois is looking to land big shots, but round over round, I see AJ outboxing, out-techniquing Daniel Dubois. So the question is, if Daniel Dubois is looking for big shots and AJ is, being the more skilled boxer puncher, what does this fight result in? What does this fight look like? Well, again, when you look at AJ versus Francis Ngannou and you look at those feints and you look at the jabs and the work to the body to set up the big shots up top, I don't think Daniel Dubois is going to be biting as badly as Francis Ngannou. Not only do I not expect Daniel Dubois to be doing this to parry down shots, but I think that Daniel Dubois might be, as he's getting coached up, might be looking for opportunities where AJ goes with a jab to the body to counter over the top with the right hand. So AJ, like he had to be careful against Francis Ngannou. He did have to be careful. I would say he had to be more careful against Ngannou than he did against Otto Wallin. So AJ can't just come in and just start going to work against Dubois. That's a good way to get hurt against Dubois. But I do think that he's going to have enough setup punches and enough craft to start landing some bigger shots of his own. Does he wobble, drop, or even stop Daniel Dubois? I think that is very possible. And if you look at the betting odds, AJ's like a -400. So he's a pretty substantial favorite. -400, that is pretty significant. So odds makers and bettors are basically looking at it like, yeah, Dubois, we do see you with that win over Filip Ergovic and Gerald Big Baby Miller. We see you making this resurgence and restoring your reputation. But now you're fighting Anthony Joshua, who's at a very good part of his career trajectory. I'm going to take Anthony Joshua, but I'm going to give Daniel Dubois the benefit of the doubt. I do think that he's got a good chin, obviously. I mean, you see the punches that he took against Ergovic, and he has taken some big shots from others. I just don't know if against AJ, we're going to see the Daniel Dubois who starts looking vulnerable and starts looking like, maybe I'm not feeling this one. Maybe he starts showing us that side of him again. But maybe he also endures enough punishment to bring this one the distance and loses via decision instead of via knockout. Again, I think that AJ is going to be winning most of the slower rounds where there's nothing huge that happens in that round. So I think he's going to be banking some of those rounds. I'm actually going to take Anthony Joshua, and I've been back and forth on the knockout versus the decision. Anthony Joshua is very knockout heavy at this point of his career, but I do think that he has to respect Daniel Dubois. I think that Daniel Dubois is going to continue to bring it. Man, you just wonder, like with two guys who are this devastating of puncher, something's got to give, right? You're like, one of these guys has to go. Can you see these guys locking horns for 12 rounds and neither guy gets stopped? You know what? When I started this video, I was actually going to say AJ via decision, because my philosophy on some of these fights is when you've got elite versus elite or near elite, it's usually going to go the distance. I mean, sometimes we do get the knockouts, we do, but in most cases, the survival skills of the fighter who's wounded, we'll say the hurt fighter, his survival skills and his IQ and his wherewithal is usually good enough to kind of get back into the fight. And if you're not getting back into the fight, to at least survive for the duration of the fight, if you've made up your mind that you want to survive the fight and you stop trying to find ways to hurt the other guy, you stop trying to find ways to really put your foot on the gas and win the fight, and you've gotten into survival mode, I do think that it's a lot more doable. And I think that we might get there here. So look, I'm kind of back and forth on whether AJ gets a stoppage or not, but I'm gonna go with my initial. I was gonna switch over to AJ via stoppage, because I'm thinking if AJ hurts Dubois, where with his setups and then landing the big shots, it almost feels inevitable. Like if Dubois doesn't hurt AJ, it seems like AJ should hurt Dubois. And if he hurts Dubois, does Dubois have enough heart to endure AJ power? Does he have enough chin to endure AJ power once he's hurt and AJ knows that he's hurt? AJ, to quote Chris Mannix, is a composed and ferocious finisher when he's at his best. And Chris Mannix famously said that right before AJ got dropped by Andy Ruiz. So after AJ knocked Ruiz down, Chris Mannix said it, and then moments later, AJ gets dropped, and it's all downhill from there. But AJ is a composed and ferocious finisher. I just think that Daniel Dubois is good enough and will be dangerous enough for AJ to have to respect him enough for Daniel Dubois to be able to make it the 12 rounds against Anthony Joshua. I'm actually taking Anthony Joshua. I think he's going to outbox Daniel Dubois. Look, I don't want to do this too much because I actually did this in the Danny Garcia Erislandy Lara fight, where I was kind of going back and forth in terms of like the who wins or the method and how they win. I ended up landing on Erislandy Lara, but I'm going to switch over one more time. I'm not going to go Daniel Dubois to make it the full 12 rounds. I'm going to take Anthony Joshua via mid to late round stoppage, somewhere in, it might not even be that late. Like, look, Anthony Joshua, I think, could win this in rounds like 5 through 7. He can stop Dubois there. Dubois can also go the distance, and I'm this close to taking Anthony Joshua via decision, but I'm going to take Anthony Joshua in rounds 8 through 10. So I think Dubois is going to endure some punishment, some suffering, but then it's going to get to a point where he either gets dropped badly in rounds 8 through 10 or goes, or you know, the ref jumps in and DuBois kind of against the ropes, or DuBois takes a knee, something like that. So either like a KO or a TKO in rounds 8 through 10. I'm going with AJ here. But yeah, let me know your thoughts on Anthony Joshua versus Daniel Dubois. How much of a chance are you giving Daniel Dubois here? Again, he at least has a puncher chance. Are you giving him anything more than just a, hey, he might land something big and everything might change? Does he have anything more than that in his chances of beating Anthony Joshua? And given the landscape of the heavyweight division, and this fight again is for the IBF heavyweight title, what happens with the winner? Say AJ beats Dubois. Does AJ fight the winner, presumably, of the Alexander Usyk versus Tyson Fury rematch? Because I think that I would think that if Fury wins the rematch, they run it back a third time, so that kind of clogs things up, and it further prolongs the wait for Fury versus AJ, or Usyk versus AJ 3, if there's still an appetite for that. But what do you think happens depending on who wins between Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois, and then who wins between Alexander Usyk and Tyson Fury in their rematch? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And do any other heavyweights play into here? Like Joseph Parker beat Deontay Wilder, beat Zhilei Zhang. Does he get a title shot anytime soon? How do you see things shaping up? There's also Martin Bakole. There's Ajit Kabayel, who's coming off back-to-back wins over Makhmudov, who I know lost another fight against Guido Vianello recently, and against Frank Sanchez. Two very impressive wins for Ajit Kabayel, both by stoppage as well. What happens with him? There's still Zhilei Zhang. F.A. Ajagba's creeping up. Yeah, let me know what you think about the landscape of the heavyweight division, and also who are you taking between Anthony Joshua and Daniel Dubois? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.